and they don't live because of TV rights. We are a different phase of sport. We organize activities, events, trying to allow all people to practice physical and sport activity for each needs, abilities, and with the lowest cost. It's important in crisis time. We don't adapt people to sport practice. We adapt sport to the features of every person, of all ages and all social conditions. We believe we have an opportunity to that movement representing a modern right of citizenship. Because movement means health, socializing, education, a positive relationship with urban space and the natural environment. The stages for our activities are the clubs of grassroots sports, schools, gymnasium, the outdoor. The form is association and voluntary work. Our operators are hundreds of thousands, especially young people. Since time we joined a network to exchange good practices and to propose shared projects. The 2007 white paper of the European Commission and the text of the treaty opened a new horizon to us. Europe decides to take care about sport based on elaboration focusing on the social value of sport, its social function. Europe calls social actors and the sport institution to engage themselves to reach, through sport, goals of growth of the cohesion of European citizenship, of citizen health. Our world, the world of grassroots sport, of sport for all, is called to face a challenge, to become a political actor and partner for European institutions to define programs and goals. We are, in fact, at the beginning of the road. There are a lot of declarations of principle. The first programs financed following the indication of the white paper are important, but their funding is very lower than the support that the European Union assures to competitive sport events, often on low level. The cessation is the lobbies of top-level sport are again the most listened. In spite of the crisis of that model, where often public powers are called to resolve economic damage produced by sport business. We believe very much in a possible action of the European Parliament. We support the need to reinforce also in Europe the seats of democratic representation. The members of Parliament are elected by the people. They know that in the city's life, the sport association and the place of sport activity are important nodes of the social networks, moments of socializing and the public meeting. They contrast urban blight and the spread of violence and intolerance. From the Parliament, it could arrive a strong indication for the Commission and for national governments, because grassroots sport, sport for all, should be considered as a priority in the welfare and the citizenship policies, should be treated in a multidisciplinary way into all the sectors of the public administration, and that the organized civil society should be considered as an essential interlocutor by the European Commission and by the institutions having competence on sport policies. The goal is to put in movement Europe, thinking about to reach 100 million citizens in the next 10 years. And we think this is a big goal of civilization. Stop for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Some very to be considered by the European Parliament, and hopefully will. I think Joanna mentioned two key words when she was speaking. She emphasised the word fun, and I suppose at the end of the day, that is one of the things that a lot of people will be asking about sport, particularly at the higher level, the elite level today. Is there fun in it? Is there fun in it for kids? Is there fun in it for the soccer players who are performing on the world stage? Have we lost the meaning of sport? And I think Joanna raised a very important point which needs to be taken into consideration. She also mentioned the word winner. And again, there needs to be a rethinking of what we actually need, of what we mean by winner. She said everybody wins. And again, that is a challenge in sport for all, to have a proper attitude to winning and to make particularly every child, as whether there are people with disabilities or with fantastic, exceptional ability, that they all can feel they're winning. So they're very important concepts which we mentioned. And of course, your point about in lower cost and including everybody, that of course again is what we have to try and do at European Parliament level. Because your point about we are elected by the people, we are elected by all the people to represent all the people, and therefore any sport policy should include all the people as well. I think that's a very good point. So now we move on to our next presentation. It is by Nicola Foro on Sport for All in Europe and the Third Sector Network.
Okay, our meeting regarding the social representation of sport and the change that the representation of sport experienced in the last decades. Sport and social change is a season of contradiction. In the tradition from the past century and the 21st century, a claim for a new post-materialistic citizenship is arising in Europe, emphasizing the crucial topics of life quality. In this perspective, sport can be recognized as a promoter of social cohesion and individual well-being. But, at the same time, the most of our organization of sport for all are facing the challenges of the market, commercialization, commodification of fitness, mediatic hegemony of professional high-performance sport, and the decline of voluntary participation. It deals not only with sports organization, but with all the system of so-called non-profit or third sector system. And it means that some scholars of ours underline that we are facing the decline of this so-called European sports model. The crucial question is that we don't agree about the correct definition of European sports model. In our tradition, we defined a European sports model as in the terms of differentiation facing the American sports model, linked to high-performance, professionalized and spectacular sport on one hand, and a widespread network of amatorial local organization and so on in the periphery of the sport system. But in my opinion, we cannot prosecute in this restrictive approach of our European system, because we experienced between the 70s and the 90s an enlargement of social participation in sport, also in countries like my country, in Italy, in which the sport participation was depressed in the past. We had a strong input to participation of new social actors, as the women, the elderly, and also the childhood. Each of these steps experienced new conflicts among the different actors of the sport system. For instance, facing a representation all oriented to high performance, for instance, encouraging a very early specialization of young people in technical sports activities and training, and a pedagogical and social-oriented representation of this practice. After the 90s, we had an increasing tendency to the self-government of spectacular and professional sport, encouraged by the coming of TV on demand, and a differentiation of cultural paradigms. Nowadays, we can speak of sport just using the plural term, sports, because we have to distinguish among traditional competitive sport, prevailingly amateur sport, spectacular professional sport, instrumental sport, in which physical activities are oriented to the new basic rules of our secularized society, do not get fat, do not get old, and not to the traditional principles of the performance-oriented activity. And last not least, the emerging expressive activities, in which the search for emotion is the most important motivation to sport. And this kind of differentiation of the system is expressed also by the social research. I recall the contribution by such a sociologist as Anthony Giddens, when underlined that the role of the full life politics and located sport, amateur sport, sport for all in this frame. Our German friends often use the term Bewegungskultur instead of sport, in order to underline the differentiation between an activity oriented to physical well-being and traditional performance sport. And a scholar like Olde Knopp defined this moment of European sport as a classic situation in which we are attending both sportization of society and desportization of sport. And this seeming contradiction can be explained because the sportization of sport means that more and more people are developing their interest in sport completely aside from the traditional organizational network of sport. In a comparative analysis of the typology of sports practices in the European countries, it is not singular that in countries characterized by very different model of organization of sport, like France having a Ministry of Sport and a traditional dedicated policy to sport activities, Germany and Spain, where the competencies on the grassroots sport are competencies of the local autonomies, or United Kingdom, where there is not an organization in the ministry, but a strong input on social campaign for sport, or the Scandinavian countries, in which, on the contrary, there are public agencies supporting sport for all and relatively weak Olympic committees, while in Italy, or in the countries inserted in European Union after the enlargement, the role of the Olympic Committee is often a role exerted on proxy by the government, national government. In Italy we have no law on sport, but you have a powerful Olympic committee which aims at managing all the frame of sports activities, both amateur and performance sports and so on. Apart from this different landscape of European sports, it is singular that in all these countries the rate of people exerting physical sports activities completely outside from the membership to organizational network like the Olympic Federation are included between 82% and 86%. It's more or less the same level in all these countries, also if they have such a different organization of the sports practice, a different social and institutional acknowledgement of sports activities. And at this point of view, the white paper, which was published 3 years ago, supports 3 possible strategies, not in order to have a direct managing role of the European Union, but in order to promote the goals that are recognized as social goals to be obtained in the 10 years of the program for developing sports activities in all the countries and for making more similar the rate of sports practices in our population. The first one strategy is an over-national one, promoting European networks and sharing programs regarding public health and higher education, developing, for instance, common statistical instruments and information for analyzing sports practices, opening the players' market, and so on. The second one is the national, encouraging in each country school programs and promotion of active ways of life, sport licenses and credits, support to non-profit sports network, and infranational ones, encouraging durable development, social integration, and equality of chances. It reveals at the same time how much sport Europeanization is still a controversial issue. It represents a strong social heterogeneity. On one hand, contrary to the far-reaching Europeanization of the economy and the legal system, politics and society largely remain organized within nation states, and it means that an issue such the one regarding sport is very differently regulated in our countries. And sports organizations are in turn located at the crossroad between institutional regulation and self-organization of society. It produces heterogeneity, but also sometimes complicated decision-making and sometimes limited capacity for action on the side of the so-called umbrella organization, which are in many cases at the crossroad between properly sports organization and voluntary system, having a sort of cooperation and integration of different cultural models. For instance, the question of the sports in natural environment, which involves the relationship with the organization of field sector or voluntary organization linked to the environmental topics. And we can, by this point of view, not only underline this heterogeneity of the system, but also be a little worried regarding the possibility to manage this process. Maybe both internationalization of sport and this increasing cultural and functional differentiation make almost impossible at present to associate the traditional administration of the sport system, and we can use in this case the word government of sport system, with its governance. Intended this difference in the meaning that governance is a process including different social actors, of course institutions, local and national institutions, transnational institutions, but also this very complicated system of the so-called third sector of voluntary association, in which we are experiencing not only in sport, maybe in sport less than in other subsystems, a very strong decline of voluntary participation in non-paid availability for giving activity in this field. And the second aspect is to closely link sport governance with nation-state action. Maybe sport policies tend to become more similar, and the scholars of political sciences call this process as isomorphism, an isomorphistic tendency to make more similar the sports organization. This is very evident in the case of the spectacular and professional sport, for instance, the organization of professional clubs and so on. But at the same time, the institution may be also for the input of the emerging transnational regulation tend to let more similar this organization. But at the same time, this process of governance of the sports system is still strongly submitted to the nation-state action. And maybe in this room today we are physically experiencing a sort of starting transnational network in which we can analyze different national and local situations, but also common worries and difficulties regarding as we can rule such a network characterized by a multitude of institutions, of different participation channels, different actors, and different stakeholders. And I want to underline this definition of stakeholder, because they can imply any organization or individual that has a stake in or may be impacted by a given approach to sports regulation. But at the same time, any participant in a community mobilization effort devoted to environmental care, programs in favor of elderly or consumers, immigrants, sport activities oriented to inclusion policies for disabled people. And it maybe implies the necessity of a European agenda for sport for all, which is completely different from the political and strategical programs of the high-performance sport. This is the role of the organization of sport for all, and also the emerging philosophy in this sub-system. I remember when Robert Putnam, analyzing the case of the United States, wrote his book, whose title was Bowling Alone. And in this book, he concluded his reflection on the transformation of the social community in the local sites of the United States, narrating a story of different people who became friends playing bowling. And the underlying the difference between a model of sports activity, which is defined as a bonding model, in which the main issue is enforcing the identity. In these days we are living the World Football Championship. Italians are not interested immediately, but is a very evident experience of participation of culture, of identity, in some cases false emphasizing identity. This is the model of the bonding sport, while the new emerging strategies can be defined as bridging experience, organizing sport for the immigrants. We in Italy have nowadays more or less 5 million immigrants, and we were till 20 years ago a country of emigration. And it means that we are, our organization of sport law must invent an approach to the immigrant people which is linked to sport as a language of the body. It means not so submitted to the constraint of the ability of language. And this can be a stronger orientation to new policies of inclusion. But and it means that the sports movement have to be mobilized in order to claim the insertion of sport in the new welfare agenda and to oppose the reduction of welfare. It means to have a concrete experience of bridging sport, which include and puts in communication different culture and different social experiences, but also supporting environmental sustainability and promoting a full integration of sport for all in the third sector. This, in my personal opinion, could be one of the crucial points of our reflection. In what a way sport can defend its specificity and at the same time as a leading member of the transformation and institutional adaptation of the third sector non-profit system. These are just some aspects of the so-called new sport, emphasizing both the social role of sport for all and its differences and results in our countries, adopting a broader point of view, including not only customers, users, clients, and all traditional performance athletes, but all the stakeholders of sport. It means using a language which is typical of the European Union, underlying the role of subsidiarity in this more complex representation of the sport system, and producing a multi-stakeholdership strategy according to the beginning of profit regulation, to the European reach, and to the campaign actions. Thank you very
much. For some very inspiring and thought-provoking ideas which can be looked at and discussed in due course. And I'm anxious to allow people in on the debate as soon as possible. We have just one other presentation and we can comment afterwards after that. So we've gone out to Petro to make a presentation to us, and he's of course the head of the sport unit, Director General for Education and Culture, European Commission. So Petro ISCA. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, it will be close enough.
Thank you, Velasquez. Yes, Mr. President, honorable members, dear friends of sport. I was going to explain to you mainly where the intentions of the European Commission as regards implementation of the new competence in the treaty. It's in Article 165, but probably it's good to take the words pronounced by Professor Porro on the European sport model, also to discuss a bit about this, because I think it's an appropriate place here to discuss about things. And I just mentioned that I was always struck me when I started working in the sport sector that the European sport model is defined by a sport model that is based in a pyramidal structure of federations, that is based on some promotion and relegation, and it's also based on other leagues and other competitions. And it's something that belongs to to a tradition in Europe that we should respect, of course, very much. But what struck me is that when reading to that, you guys, you wish that we are not in here. We are out of this European sport model. If we believe in this description of what this accepted or very often accepted as a European sport model. And then if we go ahead in the analysis, I mean, pyramidal structure, okay, but what's the difference with other continents? The structure is not pyramidal in other continents, it's not the same internationally. Promotion, relegation of the leagues, it refers to a few sports. I don't know where's fencing here, for instance, or golf, or tennis, just to mention a few sports. So there's something here that always struck me as not fitting in the whole debate, and probably something that we should discuss. On the other side, it is often described in opposition to the American sports model. But actually what we are comparing is a few sports with other few sports, with professional American sports, which are 4, maybe 5 in soccer. So what are we really comparing in all these debates? So probably it's a debate that deserves some more rigor. In my opinion, with all the respect for the fact that autonomously sports worlds and sports federations have decided for organizing their sport this way, it's fair enough, we are very happy with that. I think that from a public perspective, what we should be more interested in is that model of sport, be it American or Australian or European, should be based on good principles of good governance, on dialogue amongst relevant stakeholders and between sport organizations and public authorities, and mutual respect of respective competencies. That's my opinion about European sports model. And now I go to Article 165 that give us for the first time the possibility to propose something concrete, something more concrete than we have been able to propose before. And of course we have worked during these last months on preparing those initiatives. We have focused during this first half of this year on consultation with stakeholders. Many of you have actively participated in this consultation. I want to thank you. We have received many position papers of your organization, especially by ISCA, a very interesting position paper. We have had a few events, one of them and the most important, the EU Sports Forum in Madrid, with all the circumstances we had to experience there with the volcanic flood, but it didn't prevent some of you to be there on very bad differences. We have also an open consultation, an online consultation, open during 2 months, 8 weeks, where we got 1,300 some contribution, which is a lot. Just to put you into perspective, I mean, health, very successful health public consultation last year, there was something like 300 and something. So we are talking about 1,300. Out of them, 400 contributions were sent by organizations, by sport organizations. So at least 400 sport organizations has directly contributed to and participated in this consultation. The remaining participation were citizens that have a particular, well, I guess they have a particular interest in sport. What's the result of all this process of consultation, including also the consultation with the member states in the first ever sport council that took place in May, the 10th of May, where we had for the first time the possibility to meet with the minister responsible for sport in all member states. Well, the result of this consultation that will be made public, of course, with the future proposals, is that there is a certain degree of convergence around some priorities that were outlined by the Commission. And those priorities are probably mainly three, where we discuss about education and social issues related with sport. That would be one of the main priorities that most people has identified as the first focus that the EU should have in defining any sport initiative. So education, social inclusion, health enhancing physical activity, all those aspects of sports. And then as more related to sport elite practices, but not only doping. Not only because in the consultations a lot of people say that we should care also about aspects related to doping, where the EU can add some value. And they mention often to the consideration of public health issue, problem that relates mainly to the use of doping in non-competitive sport or in non-competition situations that is apparently spreading in some areas of sport practice, and also on preventive and educational measures related to doping. So there is a high degree of convergence on the areas that you have identified here. And now, what we are going to propose concretely, first of all, a communication of the Commission addressed to the Parliament and to the Council of the European Union, where we defined to describe our vision as Commission of what we can do with this new competence, and also to propose concrete actions and to define our priorities. On this basis, the Parliament and the Council will most probably react to this proposal of the Commission, and at the same time we intend to accompany this policy initiative with a proposal for a decision for EU's sport program, for a first EU sport program covering the period 2012-2013, because we cannot propose any proposal of this kind beyond the current financial perspectives that ends in 2013. So those are the two main actions that are intended to be adopted in November. This is where we are working now very hard, or as hard as we can. But we are also working in parallel in preparing future actions, because we have launched last year preparatory actions in the field of sport. Preparatory actions are intended to prepare the program, the future program. We had a very good bunch of projects that we were able to select, not as many as we had wished, but at least we have very nice 18 projects that are running during 2010. We'll have results next year. One of the projects is it's a project from ISCA on precisely these issues that we are discussing now, how to promote physical activity among citizens, but we have also projects from you, WISP here, but also in gender, and we have very, very good examples. The areas defined last year were gender, health enhancing physical activity, education and training, and disability. We have launched last month preparatory actions, the call for proposals for preparatory actions in 2011, covering 3 areas: doping, volunteering, and social inclusion. So I invite you to present proposals and to spread the word amongst your networks. The call will be open until end of August. There is still some time to prepare good projects. And then we have, at the same time, proposed in the draft budget for 2011 already preparatory actions for 2011. Areas still to be defined because it's under discussion with the Parliament, and we have already had some good news. The Parliament intends to supplement the budget that we have proposed, but as I said, this is still under discussion in the frame of the budgetary procedure. So we will have, therefore, a continuity in these actions, because we will cover in 2011 the year with preparatory actions, and if everything goes as we have, million citizens that will practice sport, and we intend to add to those that already practice sport. According to our Eurobarometer 2009, there must be, we have already 40% people, European citizens, that we consider that practice either sport or physical activity regularly, at least once a week. Makes, if my counts are right, more or less 200 million. So we intend to arrive to 60% to 300 million. And that's a very nice objective that we subscribe, and I think that's a very good initiative that goes into the philosophy of what we intend to propose in the future. It's very important that from the European Union we can take advantage of the capacity we have to observe good practices in Europe, and to help to create networks in order to exchange those good practices. I always remember a nice example of the kind of practices, of good practices we have in Europe, but it was a very interesting study about participation in sport and physical activity, and they made the relation in that study between participation in sports and the overall economy of the country, the wealth of the country. And of course there are two curves that go in parallel. The richer a country, the more participation in sport, physical activity, and we can always understand why. Now there were a few exceptions to that, and one of the exceptions, the good exceptions, were within the European Union. Many Nordic countries where the participation which was much higher, is much higher than what one could expect about comparing with the wealth of the country, which is already quite good. But I mean, there is really something that is being done in those countries that promote participations above the levels you could normally expect in one country with this level of wellness. So this is just an example to understand and probably to illustrate how we Europeans, from the European institution, we make it possible to exchange good practices. We can contribute to reaching those objectives that anyway will be reached by those that are in contact with the citizen, and those are, of course, the sport organizations. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
And thank you for an overview of where the Commission is at present. And many of the points you raised, I'm sure people will want to maybe ask questions on. We can do that in a few minutes. So I don't want to speak much further. And then I'm going to hand over to Morgan Hickstry, the President of the ISCA. Before that, I will give to my colleague here, Emma McLaughlin, a very active MEP from the United Kingdom, and who's I've seen her at all seminars in relation to sport and very active in sport. I know that matters indeed in Parliament, so I'll ask her to say a few words first, and then I'll hand over to Morgan, who will chair the open debate.
Mr. Kelly asked me to take part in co-host today's event. He says he'd come up with a nice, catchy title for it, and it was Sports for All, 100 million more Europeans active in sport and physical education by 2020. I said, that's not catchy, that's a challenge. But I like a challenge, so that's why I'm here, to think about how we can actually make this statement a reality. And it's not going to be easy. So as a new Member of Parliament that used to work in sport, I wasn't an athlete, quite clearly, but I used to work for a national governing body. How can we take on all the stakeholders' opinions, together with the parliamentarians, together with the Commission, to actually make this a reality and deliver on the objectives that we set out. And the way that we can really achieve this is by listening to you guys, but also it's through the delivery of grassroots sport. And I truly believe that because I've seen it in action. But I do have some reservations about the new competence that the EU has been given in sport, because I do believe that sport should be governing themselves. They are the people that know the sport best, know how to deliver it best, and they don't need new rules written from Brussels here. But we could perhaps be more useful if we were helping put the grassroots priorities at the very top of our list about how they're delivering an increase in participation and working towards the physical activity and sports aims that we have for 2020. So that's kind of where I come from. Now, I do believe that the professional game has a very important contribution to make in terms of inspiring and thrilling us all. It also generates a lot of revenue, which it injects into grassroots sport, so it cannot be forgotten. But it really is the grassroots that can deliver on our objectives, what we want to achieve. They're the people that are doing it at a very local community level. And that is where I believe that the EU should be focusing its activity. How can we help grassroots sports associations and tiny small clubs deliver at that local level? And this is where we'll see the surge in an increase in participation, but also in the activity, physical activity numbers that we need to raise up. From my own personal experience from working in sport, when we deal with these two separated sport and physical activity issues, it's sometimes been very disjointed discussions that we've had. And I think that the EU, if it can take a positive role in this, can sort of bring together and coordinate people and bring cooperation from both sides. Because this is something that is going to be touched on in education policy, in health policy, and in what we're actually trying to deliver in a sports agenda as well. So there are lots of different ways that we can actually pull all this together. And perhaps Pedro can enlighten us as to how that joined up thinking from DG Sanko with sports directors on education policies, how that is going to feed in to making this part of a wider spectrum. But I hope that we can break down those sort of brackets that sport and then physical activity have been in for many, many years. I think that is where we'll make some real breakthrough if we can do that. So I won't say too much more. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you guys about what you think we should be doing instead.
Okay, some suggestions to make regarding URDs, which are very welcome. Now at this stage I might hand over to Morgans and can share the debate and lead it along and let them be open to the floor to all of you who very kindly come along to make a contribution, either a question or a suggestion or whatever. Okay, Morgans.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. Thank you also to the MEP of McClarkin and Joanna Simpson for hosting this event. You are representing 1.5% of the parliament, but it's a good percent, I guess. We hope to grow a little bit on this number, but thank you very much for hosting and contributing. And I also thank Nicola and Pedro Velasquez. Pedro for his initial remarks on the sport model. I would like to tell you a little story because once there was a general in the military, he sent his soldiers out for orienteering. You know, orienteering where you have a map and you find your way through the nature. And the general said to the soldier, if there is a difference between the map and reality, it's the map that's correct. And this is more or less the case that we have with the European sport model, or the so-called sport model. We have a model and then we have the reality. And we believe it's not the model that's correct, but it is the reality. So following up on this initial remarks from Pedro, we hope that the model can be an illustration of reality. And we have to invent a better model than a pyramid where everything is interlinked, especially when it's not that in reality. I am would like to chair a question, comments, debate session here. I think I got this task because I know some of you. I know some of you are very precise, and some of you would like to speak for a longer time. I will try to give as many as possible the floor. We will do this for, let's say, 30, 40 minutes, and then we will return to the panelists. We will give the floor to the members of parliament, and you will also have the chance to question and comment on their contribution. But right now, I would like to open the floor for comments and contributions. Before I do it, I would like to say that I'm happy to see that even though we have in this first part of the meeting spoken a lot about sport, I'm happy to see that there are quite a few representing physical activity, non-sport physical activity. And for us, these are equal partners of today's meeting. Bear over with us who are from the sports sector, but we consider the physical activity, the fitness, the commuting, human power commuting sector as neighbor sector to the grassroots sports sector. So very much welcome to also you representing physical activity beyond sport. Okay, I will start in the left end. We have Philippe Monsieur, President of Youth in France.
Thanks. I don't well understand all you may tell us because I'm French. My English language is not very easy, but I'm sure we have common preoccupations about sport or development in Europe. Excuse me if I repeat what you already said, but what about the French example in the South African Football Cup? I'm not really proud, but it's a very good level for sport for all. Is demonstrated. Show sport is show sport, and sport for all is another sport we think very useful for human society. Sport for all may be a very useful level to develop health, education, social economy, and social life, but it needs some conditions. First, I think we must explore different kinds of sport organization to answer the sport for all problem. Association organization which promote common project, collective values, and self-organization responsibility. But we must look also about any kind of social organization which organize the way between adapted sport activities and these people who is so far from any social or physical activity. Second, I think specific sport animation for these people are necessary. We need a real politic project to get equipments. Equipments, they may accept different kinds of people for different kinds of activity. Equipments, they may offer meeting of different generation and culture. Equipments which build equipments built near the population needs. We need a real Marshall Plan for neighbor-adapted equipments. Third, I don't say anything about sport employment, but it's a real field of new words about social way to get people alive, more happy, healthy, solidar. Health, education, culture may support a real and important new work sector for each one. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philippe Monsieur.
As you can, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Bones. I would like to agree with Ms McClarkin and the part of what she was saying, that we as people representing sport and physical activity don't want over-regulation from the EU. But I do think the major thrust of the problem is, as Mr. Kelly said in his introduction, is the power of the lobby of the major sports and of the Olympic Sports Organisation. And I think that we have to have a level playing field where us as organisations representing sport for all have a fair crack of the whip. I was very impressed with the recommendations that came from the EC recommending that the funding for sport by national governments should not be dependent upon performance. I think that's a good start, and I think that anyone obtaining funding from the national bodies should meet the three priorities, that is, of education, social inclusion and health.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
I'm Timo Hauklet from the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland, from sport unit there. I would like to emphasize the cooperation within the ministries in every country when we try to foster health-enhancing physical activity. And also here in this EU frame concerning sport sector and Sanko here, which have done very good cooperation. And concerning this, I would like to have a question to Mr. Laske concerning health-enhancing physical activity and the guidelines. Do you know, is Belgium ready to take it on its agenda or the second EU presidency? But do you know something about this, or what is the situation now? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. We owe a special tribute to
health-enhancing physical activity. For those that are not familiar with this document, this was a document that was prepared by a group of experts convened by the European Commission from different member states, from different governments, and also the participation of some sport organizations. They agreed on some recommendations in order to provide guidelines for the definition of different policies, not only in the field of sport, but in any other area where there can be an impact on promotion of physical activity, in areas like urban planning, or health, or education, employment, and any other area. There were a set of recommendations based also on some good practices identified and described in the document. This document was endorsed by sport ministers, informally of course, because this document was produced before we had the competence in the treaty, so there could be no formal decision. As this is one of the key areas and one of the priority areas that we have identified after the consultation, of course we intend to give some follow-up to this document. Of course I know what the follow-up is that we have proposed, but this document has not yet been adopted by the Commission. So the communication, of course, will elaborate on these guidelines that we propose, some concrete follow-up, but you understand I cannot now name exactly what we have proposed at this stage in this document, but that will be one of the key areas in the document.
Thank you. Now we are moving to the non-sporting
association. I hope you can hear me. There's no microphone here. I think we can all agree in the room the benefits from regular physical activity, and we certainly support ISCA's ambitions and expectations to see this ambitious target of another 100 million people taking part in regular physical activity. And certainly from our perspective, fitness should be fun, should be about fun, should be about participation. And we have an estimated 40,000 facilities across Europe, a massive workforce of 350,000 people. So we're in most communities, but we are also slightly unusual, I think, in this room, insofar as we are from the private, public and voluntary sectors. And I suppose my little plea here is don't lose sight of actually the capacity within the private sector in being able to contribute to your expectations and ambitions. Here they have marvellous facilities, lots of expertise. But across all of the industry, and I think perhaps in many of your own individual sectors, I think the challenge for all of us in this room is how do you get these people who are currently not active to begin to participate? And we think this is all about skills for individuals, and some of those skills perhaps have to be actually quite specialist. It's not just fitness is fun, you actually have to understand the psychology, the behaviour, the motivational skills which everyone will need. And I think by cooperating together, it is a marvellous initiative. We clearly want to support you in all this, Mogans, and more than play our contribution to it. Thank you.
Things that the EU could do is to make a championship of the participation. You see, we all know of this global arms race of medals, where governments are competing who have the best system by counting the medals at the Olympics. But we need something to contradict that. That could be the championship of participation. I think the Eurobarometer is the first step, but we could strengthen that. We have some definitions and conditions where we could compare the participation rates of different countries. And the EU can make a championship of it. So you can see, well, what's going on, because statistics in this area is creating policy. We can see within the education sector of the PISA examinations of the school system. If we create something like that here, that the EUC also would put some prestige into it and market it, tell about it all over the world. So you say, well, now this year Denmark is the best, next year it's Germany. How about France and so on? That is perhaps a way to promote this. And I think we are, in fact, close with the Eurobarometer, but we have to develop a bit further and put some political attention to it.
Thank you. The European Human Rights is also a colleague from the Platform for Action on Diet, Physical Activity and Health, representing a total different sector, but a physical active sector. Please.
Thank you. My name is Randy Zhivnitsky, and I represent the European Cyclists Federation, with representing over 500,000 cyclists across the EU. We are very happy to support the goal of 100 million more sporters, 100 million more people who are physically active, because one of the important goals of the ECF is to have more people cycling, more trips, more often. And we feel quite strongly, working together with Mogens, that we have very complementary interests. If we, together, get 100 million more people physically active on a regular, let's even say on an everyday basis, getting their 30 minutes of physical activity one way or another, we're going to have more people who are doing sports for all. We're going to have more people who are cycling to work, cycling to school, walking, using public transport. Any of these things are good for people getting in their everyday physical activity. And one key similarity is that so many people tell us that they are riding their bicycle on a regular basis because it's fun. It is usually the quickest, fastest, and most efficient way to get from point A to point B, but it's fun, and you hardly ever are sitting in traffic. A comment to the idea of promoting professional sports. I think we can work together there, and I would like to see a lot more attention to professional people, spectators, going to such spectator sports, doing that in a physically active way. Maybe there could be some kind of a discount for people who show up on foot or on bicycle or using public transport rather than just using their car. And I'm not suggesting another tax on cars, but maybe just a lot fewer parking spaces available for these things, and let more space be available for people to be able to do sports for all in those areas instead of in the parking spaces.
Thank you very much. The European Cyclist Federation, or the cyclist movement, has this very interesting statistic that the more people that are cycling in each country, the safer it gets. This is a little bit opposite than car traffic, for example, where the more cars are running, the more dangerous it gets. But on a bike, what do you call it, Randy? Many makes it more safe, or what is it called?
It's called safety in numbers, a principle that's been endorsed by the WHO and a number of other HAPA-related organizations. The more people that are doing it, the safer it gets.
So with 100 million more extra, it can be pretty safe to be Europeans in a few years, I think. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Matthew Philpott. I'm the coordinator for the European Healthy Stadium Network, and it's really just a follow-on from the point that you've just made there and that McClarkin made before in terms of trying to actually utilise the role of professional sports clubs, not only actively travelling to sports clubs every other week in their hometown via cycling routes, via active walking routes, but also trying to make sure the governing bodies and individual sports stadiums themselves are engaged in terms of their own communities, trying to run physical activity plans and projects with their own communities themselves. Not only physical activity, which hopefully plays into today's agenda, but also healthy eating programs in terms of cardiovascular disease. That is one of the main risk factors, actually over and above physical activity, that needs to be attended to. And so really what we're running at the moment is some guidance with Stadia, which is endorsed now by the World Heart Federation, and we're looking for more countries across Europe. We now have 12 individual countries that are working with their Stadia in Europe, and we're actively looking for more EU member states to join our network and to work on good practices and new case studies to share amongst our community.
Thank you very much. I feel we come around in the sector. It's nice to have the input from other entities than those representing only grassroots sport. Thank you very much for your contribution so far. We will now give the floor to the panelists, the three members of Parliament, and the first one will be Joanna Simpson, please.
Thank you. I would like to tell you a few words on the declaration on the need for increased community support for grassroots sport, which I have prepared together with Sean, Mary Hannibal, Ivo Belet, and Hannu Takula. Taking into consideration, first of all, the possible impact of the economic crisis on funding of grassroots sport, we call on member states to ensure that grassroots sport will not be seen as an area where funding can be cut in times of crisis. In the declaration, we would like also to remind everybody that sports funding can contribute to many key policy areas such as health, education, social integration and culture, as well as crime reduction. Therefore, the right funding for sport can result in saving the member states' governments large sums of money. We underline as well the educational role of sport. We call on member states and sport organizations to put special focus on the project of training for young players and athletes. In the process of education in general, physical education and sport programs help to create habits and behavior that contribute to the well-being of people. Sport is also an effective tool in fighting all forms of discrimination. Therefore, we call to the Commission and Member States to promote equal and easier access to sport for all citizens, in particular the underrepresented groups as women, seniors and disabled people. What is needed for all these actions and priorities? We know funds. Money will always find its way for elite sport, but community sport should never lack funding. Therefore, we called on the European Commission to prioritize grassroots sports in the upcoming communication and in the proposal for the full European Union sports program from 2012. We believe this declaration to be a political voice from the Parliament that we care for grassroots we want to support it, and we want it to be seriously taken into account by the European Commission in its work. Our declaration could only have limited number of words, so there was not too much space to mention and the positive sides and needs of grassroots sports. But our vision is clear. Increased support of grassroots sport and of sport for all. This is a way to better and healthier living of Europeans. I would like to invite you now for the official presentation of the declaration, which is going to take place on the 1st of September. All the details will follow. For the draft project, you can contact our offices. We count, of course, on your help in promoting, and we thank you in advance for your help in getting more support for grassroots sports in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. This was a very, very concrete proposal, already action, draft of a written declaration on increased community support for grassroots sport. There's a process from now, but Joanna invited everybody to contribute until a launch presentation of 1st of September. Thank you very much for this initiative. I think even though the words are limited in such a declaration, some of them our words were very good, and we thank you for your initiative together with your colleagues. I'd like to pass on to Emma McClarkin.
I'm probably just going to refer to I'm just going to refer back to some of the comments that I've heard and give my reactions to some of them. Mr. Scotland, sorry, I can't remember your name, but you're quite right, and I don't think that Sean is wrong either. We do absolutely need to be hearing minority sports and the voice from the grassroots, absolutely. And we need to make sure that the EU does that instead of focusing on professional sport. And a lot of what we've been doing already has focused particularly on football, and we need to get away from that. And we need to get away from hearing the people that are shouting the loudest. I used to work for the Rugby Football Union. That's classified as a minority sport in the big scheme of the European Union. And I'm absolutely determined that the minority sports will also have that seat around the table, because their voice needs to be heard as well. So I totally agree with you that we need to sort of move away from major sports and the ISC associations as well. And sorry, I'm going to do Mr. Finland now. Mr. Finland, cooperation, joining up thinking between the ministries. I think we absolutely need to make that clear, that any delivery on physical activity and increased participation with a view to reducing obesity and reaching health goals needs to have absolute joined up health thinking. And what the EU could be really good at, but I wish that it would focus on more of the time rather than legislation and regulation, is the exchange of best practice. And as we've already heard, Lynn has a great example to share with the rest of Europe, and that's what we really need to make sure that we focus on delivering as well, is that exchange of best practice of what other people is what's working for other people. How can we get people off the sofa? Cliff, I believe that's how I term it. How do you get people off of the sofa, away from the television, and being active in sports? How do we sell that to people? We need to make sure that they have physical activity included in their education and schooling, that it is not removed and replaced by other targets, that children aren't selling, or the schools aren't selling off the children's playing fields, that they have access to the open spaces that they need and the equipment that they also need to gain to get involved in sport. It needs to be fun, but FUN is the first 3 words of funding, and if the EU is to deliver, what you guys on the other side of this room really want is to see is some European funding supporting your activities at that lower grassroots level, and to deliver on delivering these targets for increased participation. So we need to make sure that it still remains fun, but that we make sure we're backing that up with funding. I like your idea of having the participation tables. Probably the UK wouldn't do very well on those, I would imagine, unfortunately. The EU doesn't really like comparing itself with its member states, but I do like this idea. Maybe it will give somebody a kick at the derriere, as they would say, to actually get going on the participation. I hope it doesn't end up like Eurovision, though, and we're always at the very bottom of the scale, that it is taken seriously. And I'm really excited to hear about the Safety in Numbers initiative run by the Cyclists Association. I think it's a good idea. I like the way you're thinking outside of the box about incentives. How can we incentivize people to participate in sport? How can we really get them into this? I think we also need to look at incentives with other sporting organisations. This is where the stadiums come in. They want to fill their stadiums with supporters at the weekend, but what can they give the communities back at the during the week when they're not in use? And that is a great example, and that is something that I know is already happening in my constituency with Northampton's Saints Rugby Club. So we can talk about that too. So I think there is a lot of good ideas around this table, and we just need to make sure that it's continually re-emphasised with the Commission and here in the Parliament, that it is not the professional game that can help deliver on these. They are part of it, but they are not going to be able to help us deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma McLaughlin. With the risk of being remembering wrong, I remember 2 figures from England. Around 3% of the population are regularly playing football. Swimming has just dropped to 6%. So twice as many are regularly swimming in England than playing football. Just to keep the numbers in mind. Sean, Kate?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I must say I found the contributions and the suggestions absolutely wonderful and inspiring. And I think it probably goes to show the need to have wide consultations, because people have very good ideas based on their experience, which could form, put together a great policy for the European Union in terms of adding value to what is there already, not replicating and certainly not regulating. And I think I would agree totally with him on that. There is a fierce danger that we could finish up becoming the policemen for sports bodies across Europe, and I would fear that would be something that would be detrimental in the long term. We have to grasp the opportunity to add value to what's there already, and particularly to reach out, which is an enormous target of 100 million more people active. But that is a wonderful target. It means the European Union is active, dealing with the citizens and getting people fitter and more active and healthier. Some of your suggestions are very good. I like the one, I saw it about the European Championship for participation. Because if you took that as your model, you turn the whole conflict, if you like, and rivalry based on medals, you turn it in its head. And you take the whole idea of sport away from the elite and down to grassroots level, where, after all, the citizens are. And I think this is certainly something that we should look at and possibly have some type of prize of money or whatever, or funding of some kind or other for countries. And let them all bring up their targets, the same as we had, it's very logical, for the 2020 targets, 20% renewable energy. You've got to get it, and it's the same here. And that's a wonderful idea. Also, the idea of safety in numbers and encouraging people to participate. I come from a town of only 10,000 people, Killarney, and a few years ago, one individual started a charity cycle race around the Ring of Kerry, which is about 130 miles. It started off with 500 people, and the race is starting at 7:30 next Saturday morning, and over 4,300 people are taking part in it. Combining good work, charity for the people with mental disabilities, with participation, and of course just the benefits in health alone, because nobody is going to get on the bike on Saturday morning for the first time. They've all been training for weeks and months for it, and without that initiative, none of them would even have a bike that might getting up in it. So there are wonderful opportunities, and we need to put these together and get people involved. Best practice exchange, of course, that's one of the areas where the European Union can collate things and put them together and form policies for people, and particularly, I suppose, for NGOs and governments to act on. I would be slightly concerned, and I go back to this again, of the whole area of getting involved in the drug issue. I know that WADA have fairly rigorous regulations now and testing, and I don't want us as the European Union to replace that. And Petro might elaborate for us on where he sees the European Union fitting into that, because you could spend an awful lot of time and money putting regulations in place and trying to police them. In actual fact, I'm not sure it is our duty at all. It's more the duty of the governing bodies of sport and WADA, and I know that they're doing it quite effectively. I know in my country anyway, that the testing is quite rigorous, and where you draw the line, I think that's something that I would like Petro maybe to add to what he'd already said. There are a lot of opportunities there, but at the end of the day, if we are to have an effective sports policy, we obviously have to have something in the short term, as Petro pointed out, because this financial perspective only takes us up 2 years. But we have to think particularly what we are going to achieve in 2020. And what we should be doing is tying in with the overall ambitions of the European Union for 2020 with our own targets and how we're going to fund them, as Emma said, and achieve them. And if we can do that, then we'll make a huge contribution to both the health, social inclusion, and all the other wonderful assets of being involved actively, either physical activity or sport. I think that's the challenge for us. Okay, thank you very much.
There was a question for Peter. I'd like to let him answer the question.
Well, thank you. When some members of this parliament sometimes ask the Commission to regulate the sport, I always reply that Article 165 is one of the few articles in the treaty which expressly forbid any harmonization of national rules. So it's simply not possible. When some other members of the parliament tell me, please don't regulate, I reply, even if we wanted, we cannot. So the situation, in my opinion, is quite clear. We have no the possibility, no the intention to regulate in the field of sport. Or what can we do in the field of doping? Of course, it will be, in my opinion, my modest opinion, nonsense to try to replace the work of WADA. But there are initiatives where the European Union can contribute to the fight against doping by, for instance, tackling prevention aspects, tackling educational aspects, tackling aspects related to doping when it is a problem of public health and not related to sports competitions. Of course, I don't see any role for the European Union or the European Commission in regulating or tackling doping in the European championships for track and field, but probably the use of doping substances in fitness sports, that's something probably that is not covered by WADA. We can help national governments to fight against this. Coordination of the action of member states. I mean, there is a European Convention on anti-doping in the Council of Europe that precedes WADA conventions a few years before. Probably there is something that we can work together with member states to see how to try and help to have a more consistent voice of the EU member states within this convention. And it's something that also fits very well with the article, because in the article there is a reference to the need to reinforce international cooperation in the field of sport, and the Council of Europe is mentioned there. So there are areas, and we are going to explain that in more details, in a more concrete manner in the communication, with some specific proposals for the contribution, and I underline contribution to the fight against doping.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions to the last round from the members of Parliament? The floor is open. Please.
Hello, my name is Jerome Perot. I'm from the Federation of the European Sporting Goods Industry. And I just wanted to say that we fully acknowledge and agree with all the objectives of 100 million people, more citizens doing sports, and also with the impact this could have on social inclusion, health aspects, crime reduction, educational aspects, and everything. We also wanted to underline the fact that it's not only those well-being policies that will be affected, but also the economic impact of sports within the European economy. I mean, our sector only represents already 65 billion euros, and I know that within the sports unit there's already an initiative going on with the Vilnius definition of sports, and sports as a whole, not only the equipment providers and not only the infrastructures, are so much more. This is being calculated for the moment, but it's a huge economic impact. So enhancing and reducing spending within grassroots sports, not only elite sports, every sport, will have also a huge impact on a certain industry, a certain sector, employment, added value to EU economy, research and development, innovation that go towards reduction of injuries and so forth. So this is also an aspect that should be taken into consideration, and we stay open for discussions on this.
Thank you very much for this contribution from the sporting goods industry. Definitely the number of 100 million Europeans more active, or 100 million more European active. The calculation, not from our side, but from this research that is currently being done on grassroots sport, financing grassroots sport, estimate a 5 billion turnover connected to these 100 million more active just in household spending. And of course, some of these spending goes to equipment and shoes and other stuff. So this is also a huge economy. Other comments to the last round of the MEPs? I'd like to give the floor to Filippo Fossati.
The words you saw was important for cooperation with the European Parliament and the world of Sport for All. Is a news in the political field. I don't hear nothing about the proposal of Madrid advisory group for dialogue with the European Commission and sports movement. Today we have ISCA here, a big network on growth, ready to keep the challenge. I think it's nonsense if nonsense table without ISCA now. It's necessary at presence of Sport for All world and association in the governance of the program sport of the European Union. What about this?
Yes, the question is, the Spanish presidency announced that there should be an advisory group, a small group, to strengthen the dialogue with the Commission. How is the selection process for this group to be considered?
Anyone in the room representing the Spanish presidency? Because it's difficult for me to reply on behalf of the Commission on a proposal that has come from the Commission. It was a proposal indeed the Spanish presidency was discussed at the ministerial meeting, and then was discussed at the council, and where no agreement could be reached because no agreement existed. Most member states also could be represented in the sports world, and even the format was of this kind of structure of meeting was not clearly defined. I know that the Belgian presidency is dealing with this idea. They are presenting new proposals. From the Commission side, as we have explained in the Council, the situation is very clear. We described very thoroughly in the white paper how we intend structured dialogue must be organized between the Commission and sports stakeholders, which is what we can take responsibility for. We intend to keep having a very inclusive and open dialogue with the sports stakeholders at different levels, so with bilateral meetings if needed, so with focus meetings and restricted meetings depending on the topics. It doesn't make sense to involve everyone to every topic, which is something that everyone can understand, but I think that it has been clear during this year that the Commission has an open doors policy to dialogue with sports organizations, and a well-structured dialogue where everyone, at least this is our ambition, is included. This is what we think about. Now, if member states consider that there is a need for a new structure to have a focused dialogue with some particular stakeholders, of course, will be in the hands of member states to accept the decision and to participate actively in that. But this will never replace the whole structured dialogue that we have with sports members. There will be some new meeting that will be added to the set of meetings that are part of this structured dialogue. This is the way we see it.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? No? Then I would like to not give a resume of the last 2 hours, but just to lead your attention to the folder that was circulated, because they don't stop today. Joanna outlined the process from now to 1st of September for the written declaration on increased support, community support to grassroots sport. She also asked you to be active, to persuade or inform your national MEPs that this is a good declaration to support. In your folder, you will also find a small advertisement of a congress coming up in October. It follows a little bit one of the topics dealt with today. It's the MOVE 2010, the European Congress on Sport for All and Health. And even though it says Sport for All, I can assure you that part of the program will also be the physical activity, the non-sport physical activity. We represent as speakers and contributors. This is an open event. It's organized in a cooperation between 3 sport for all umbrellas in Europe. And please feel free to join, to spread the message, and also if you have a special interest in contributing to the events, feel free to contact us. As I see, there's only between now and 2020 a few million Europeans, 100 to be precisely. I heard today a very strong support to this goal. We will try to formulate it again and again, as precisely as possible, to as many as possible, and roughly counting some of the umbrella organizations and institutions represented here today. I'm sure we have institutions or associations altogether representing more than 250 entities in EU. The different umbrella organizations, institutions here represent, as a minimum, as I can count, 250 different national entities. That's a good start to promoting this 100 million more active Europeans. I'd like to thank you, especially John, Joanna and Emma, for taking the time, showing the commitment and hosting. And I would like to give the floor to John to say final words for us to leave from here with the common goal, 100 million more active Europeans, 2020.
Thank you, Morgan, and on behalf of Joanna, Emma and myself, I want to thank you for coming. It was a pleasure having you, and I think our discussion has been very worthwhile and hopefully will bear fruit, and that the target, simple target, but a very challenging target, will become the core of the European Union's policy for sport in the future. And if it does, then it has been a fantastic day, because once the sports policy is decided and enacted, it's going to be very hard to influence change. That's the way with all bodies. So now is the time to make the voices heard, to put forward proposals and to get the right policies into place. Because the stakes are high, the future of sport in general, and particularly the health of the European Union and the quality of life is at stake. I think it's probably the best opportunity that the European Union will have to show that it cares about citizens, and particularly that it can bring them closer to citizens. Because since I came to this Parliament a year ago, I'm sure Emma and Joanna would agree with me, we hear in Parliament speech after speech saying we need to be closer to citizens. Well, the best and the easiest way to do it, and the cheapest in fact, is through sport. You've pointed out what you would call a niche where the European Union can make a huge difference, and if we reach that target of 100 million more people active, then I think nothing could compare to the advantages that is going to bring to people right across the European Union, economically, health-wise, socially, you name it. So it's a great cause, a wonderful aspiration. So we've got to ensure that our voices are heard and that this becomes the core policy for Europe over the next 10 years. So your coming here today has been very, very important. We've had simple messages, but the best ideas are simple, because they're the easiest to implement. They touch a core of people, and therefore we have an opportunity which we must take. So Morgans, you and your colleagues, thank you. We look forward to working with you in the future, and of course for the next year or two we have to keep a very close eye on everything that's happening. The final one I would say is, from my dealings with the Commission here, they are very open to suggestions. They want to do what is right, and it's up to us now to work together and to put the best foot forward so that the European Union, it's not the Council, it's not the Commission, it's not the Parliament, but the European Union, on behalf of the people of Europe, are going to make a huge difference and add value where it is most needed and never there before. So thank you one and all for coming. I hope to see you again in due course. Thank you.
Pleased to be here at your meeting, and it is a real pleasure for me to welcome all of you on behalf of the European Economic and Social Committee and in our premises. And I'm very sorry to see that there is technical problem, but I hope that it will be solved soon. So I have to tell you honestly that it happens also in our meetings, not here, but in our main building, which is in the Riberia. It's about 2-3 minutes from here, so it's not far, but I hope that the technicians can solve it. So that, yeah, my name is Erika Koller, and I'm a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and I'm Hungarian. And I would like to introduce first our committee for you. So that I was hesitating because we have a long PowerPoint presentation on the internet, and I was thinking to use this or just to say something about our committee, and then maybe you can ask me something, and then I can answer the questions how to do. But as I didn't know that this technical problem will appear, but it's better that I did not decide to use this PowerPoint presentation. I have found it much too long, so it is the reason. So going back to the ESC. The ESC was set up in 1957 by Rome treaties in order to involve economic and social interest groups in the establishment of the common market and to provide institutional machinery for reading the European Commission and Council of Ministers on European Union issues. So the European Economic and Social Committee is a consultative body of the European Union. As we say about ourselves, we are the bridge between Europe and organized civil society. It has 344 members from the 27 member states, and the number of the members, it is decided on the territory and the number of the population of the given country. So, for example, Hungary is a medium-sized country in the European Union. Hungary has 12 members. The same with the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, so that because it's more or less the same number of the population and the territory. So, but for example, Britain, Germany, Spain, they have 27 members, 26, and so on. So, our work is organized in 3 groups, and the groups are the group 1, as we call it. It's the employers group. The group 2 is the employees group, trade union representatives, and I come from that group. And the third group is the various interest groups, and it is the most colorful group in the meaning that there are present people from all kinds of civil society organizations. So there are from agriculture, children association, that consumers, for example, and everything what you can imagine, like civil society organizations. So then sport associations also should be there. If if there are some, but I don't think so that there are or there is somebody, because then this the white paper on sport would have not given to me, who comes from trade unions. So I think there is that. But if somebody would apply from sport association and would be chosen by the government, then it would belong to the group 3. Yeah, when there was this work on the white paper, then I was asked, how and why do you do this sport and so on and so on. Okay, why? Because I can tell you, it's very personal, but I've done this sport for many years, 7 years, and I wanted to be teacher of sport, but finally it didn't happen like that, but it was the reason. And then in my family, everybody deals with sport. And now my niece, he is a member of the Hungarian national team in basketball. So we are connected with sport. So okay, moving back to the ESC. Then the work is also organized in 6 different sections, which means that there are these sections deal with the given territory of work. And for example, there are a section of social issues, employment, citizenship. It is the topic of the work. Then REX is the external issues. Then agriculture, the last section is deals with agriculture. Then there is another one with internal market. Then economic issues, and then the last one is the transport energy section. So, and in our committee there are all kinds of subgroups. I mean that, for example, in the external relations section, there are all kinds of roundtables with other countries. The EU, then in that meeting, in the roundtables, the European Economic and Social Committee represents the European Union with another countries, civil society on that commercial relationship. For example, EU-India roundtable, that there is one with China also. We are not very much favor, but it's not up to us. But the European Commission asked us to represent the European civil society. So then, yeah, just something another issue, that our mandate was 4 years, but now it's changing for 5 years. Because after the ratification of the new Lisbon Treaty, it became 5 years. And now it's running the renewal of the membership of the ESC. So the task of members is to issue opinions on matters of European interest to the Council, the Commission and the European Parliament, and we have advisory role. Consultation of the ESC by the Commission or the Council is mandatory in certain cases. In other cases, it is only optional. The ESC may, however, also adopt opinions on its own initiative. And on average, the ESC delivers 170 advisory documents and opinions a year. So you can imagine, it's a huge machinery, really. One of these opinions was the white paper on sport in 2008. In this opinion, our committee made several recommendations on the white paper on sport itself. We made our proposals on some issues that are connected with sport from the point of view of civil society. If we look at the opinion that we adopted, we can find many common elements with the ideas and proposals made by your organization, ISCA. So And just to stop here for a second, because I prepared this presentation for today, but I find it better to be less formal. So it is also very strange that there was an opinion on that one, but two on voluntary work as well. And the rapporteur of one of these two ones was also me. So it's just by chance, and I find it important to mention that we also dealt in voluntary work, and I think that this idea that the year 2011, the year of volunteering, that we strongly supported this idea, so I think that we had some influence on it. So that we agree with you that sport could be an instrument for social inclusion, with a view to encouraging close cooperation between socially excluded and disadvantaged groups, social groups, and society as a whole. As 2010 is the European Year for Combating Poverty and Social Exclusion, it would be even more important to concentrate on this very important issue. We also agree that the role of volunteers play an important role in the grassroots sector. So then, and finally, I would like to say that we like very much your vision about what was the figure, about 100 million more EU citizens active in sport and physical activity by 2020. So thank you very much.
That could be a strategy, because if you are asked on the sport issue, we could assist you with information and evidence for the coming advice from the ISCA. That could be one strategy. But the question is also, how are you working together with other entities, for example, the Committee of Regions? Are you working together with them on specific issues? Because as I know, they have the same right to give advice and comments.
Yes, Committee of Regions, we have common building. But it does not mean that we know some of the members of the Committee of Regions, but sincerely, not very much. And now one of the aim is to refresh, let's say, this cooperation or the cooperation with the Committee of Regions as well, because it was not working very well, to be very honest. But yes, and I agree with you that you could give me support, or you could be, would have been my advisor when I wrote this paper, but I did not know really who to ask. But I have found a very good expert on the topic, a Hungarian lady who deals with European sport for 20 years. And now, as we are members of the European Union, she attends all kinds of meetings. So she was really very good, and I think that this opinion became like it was because of her also. So we have to work on it to make this relationship better with Committee of Regions.
I think it's very important for all of us. My name is Galina Gorbachenkova. I am Secretary General of Latvian Sport for All Association, and I am Vice President of European Federation for Company Sport. And my organization, Latvian Sport for All Association, is a member of 6 international Sport for All Associations. I very, very big difference between sport and health and between sport for all. For example, in my country, in Latvia, it's really very, very big difference. You know that we very often have Olympic medals, summer and winter Olympic Games. Okay, 1 or 2 or 3, but our population has the worst health in the Europe. And we try, of course, to do the best, but not our ministry for education, health, and social. It's not here us. Of course, we organize many very different events for education about, sorry about my English, about prophylaxis. Yes? We try to do many really different events, but okay, we try, but we don't have received support from ministry. And I think it's very, very important if we find connection with European Union, and if we prepare a project, and if we will receive money, it's of course will be very, very, very nice for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kalina.
I am Kęstutis Leviskis, Lithuanian Country Sport and Culture Association, Nemunas, board chairman. Now, our organization, we have 155 sport and culture clubs. It's about 20,000 members. We every year organize about 90 different sport and culture events, seminars, conference. We take part also in the different international programs, seminars, and festivals. We prepare different projects, and also we send for European Union, European Commission. But I also want one question, but you answer later. I don't know, it is contact the Committee Education and Culture and Economic and Social Committee, because we write different project for Committee Education, yes, because also you cooperate with 2 committees about sport and culture. For Lithuanian, the same problems that our sport department thinking only about professional sport, and from the station for government, for ministry, it is only 1% for our sport for all organizations, and very little changes about sport and health. And we know about what maybe only organizers, but no people. There's no reclam about this recommendation. And it will be very nice that the European Commission more declare this opinion, and about 3 hours for lessons. Earlier was 4 hours, and now only 2 hours in the secondary schools. And the universities closed physical education, all programs. No, it's a big, very problem. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other?
Good morning, everybody. I would like to introduce me. I'm Daniela Conti, and mine will be Paolo Balestri. So we reduced the time for the presentation representation. We are part of the International Department of ISCA, that is the Italian Sport for All Association, who has the goal, as of course the majority of the organizations who are represented here, to promote the right for everybody to practice sport. And for doing that, we promote many projects at the local level, a national level, also European level. Like, for example, we are a promoter of a project inside the preparatory action of Unity Sport on equal opportunity between women and men, and we are a partner of the ISCA project about health, Project Santé. And we work a lot with the school in the field of education to sport and through sport. And our main focus in the last period was health and also the social inclusion. For doing that, we work also in the prison with migrant group, with migrant community in Italy, and we promote a lot of events. One of these you've got on the table, very small presentation, because next week we will have our big event against racism in Italy. And of course we are very happy to be here and very happy for yesterday, because it was very important to talk about the problem of sport for all, because we need to be listened by the European Commission, because I think that the sport world is very complex. It's not possible to reduce to the difference between high-level sport and just people who practice sport. There's very various topics, and I think that as ISCA Europe we can really give a great contribute to the discussion and preparation of the future program. Thanks.
Thank you. I think this introduction did not include Nicholas, so please.
My name is Nicola Porro. I teach elements of sociology and sociology of sport at the University of Cassino in Italy. In fact, I don't perceive myself today as a top leader in the network of Sport for All Association, but surely as a top friend of Sport for All. It is consistent with the academic and scientific mission of my university. 10 years ago, after the university reform which instituted in Italy the important faculties of sports sciences, we were the unique one among the 39 course of degrees which selected as main field of research and of teaching two specific topics, not specific, very large topics, but specifically oriented to the relationship with the domain of sport for all. On one hand, the relationship among sport, physical activity at large, and health. And on the other side, the relationship between sport for all and new right of citizenship. It means that we are specifically involved both in programs regarding the healthcare and the social policies. This is our virtual contribution to the development of our network, and we are very glad and honored to be part of the promoters network of the Sante network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. We will skip Carlo. We know who he is. Next one, Harold, please.
Yeah, my name is Herbert Hartmann. Today I am representing the German Gymnastics Federation. So you have asked for a short report on our current activities with a European profile. I cannot tell so much about that, but especially one of our main activities and are now the preparation of the Congress, 2010, and you have got the already the second announcement, and together with our program committee, Lawrence and others, we are working to develop this program, and I hope all of you will show up at this occasion. Maybe also I can mention our involvement in another EU project. We are also involved in the Santa project, but we also are involved in another EU project from the Finnish Sport for All organization. The title is Sport Club for Health. It's the idea to give the sport club as a setting a certain profile, health profile. And we are responsible for one of the work packages to develop a certification system for this idea and for this concept. And we are working together also with DGI in this aspect, also with SUS and SWOLI. So we have also put together some other ideas how to certify this kind of a healthy setting. I think it's a very interesting idea and a very prospective project, and I'm sure we also can link this project with our Santa project. We have similar goals. Maybe I can also mention two new initiatives in my federation, which might have, and I hope it will have later on, also a European perspective. We made a new focus in our policy for elderly people. We are involved since a long time for special programs for elderly people. But we are more and more, we now focus on the age group of very old people, over 80 years old. You know the reason. This group is dynamically growing, and within a sport organization, nobody has thought about that so long. So, and we developed at first new programs, evidence-based programs, exercise programs. One is the prevention of dementia. It's a very new one, based on scientific researches. And the other one is prevention of falls. And the second new idea in this kind of programs and to develop these programs is the approach on the organizational aspects. We don't try to develop these programs only inside our clubs and for our club members, but we open it for other organizations. We are cooperating on the local level with a lot of other organizations involved in senior activities. So there are a lot of other organizations. And also with a local policy in that. So this is a good concept to attract people which are not normally involved in club sports. So bring them together. We have the same idea with a second project with migrant women on a community level, with the same focus to get in contact with other organizations working with migrants and then make something together. And I think this is also, I hope we can collect experience which can be also used on a more international level later on.
Thank you very much. Tony?
Hello, good morning. First, apologize for not participating in yesterday's meeting, but I have an appointment here in Brussels. I'm glad to be here with you, and it's my pleasure to meet you again. My name is Tony Job. I'm representing UBAE. UBAE is an umbrella organization which was born in the area of Barcelona in the late 80s. It's a real social civil movement. It was born thanks to the effort of some parents who were interested in organizing physical activity in the schools for the children after school time. Thanks to that effort, they organized themselves and they created some district organizations, and today these district organizations are members of UBAE. Due to the Olympic fever in the city of Barcelona, a lot of sport facilities were built, and for municipalities, a good way to organize physical activities on that facilities was to look for partners able to manage these facilities. That was in the early 90s, and that was where UBAE developed its real know-how and its real social management concept. social management is understood as a way to organize physical activity in public sport facilities and a way to provide physical activity programs for all kinds of people. We do that thanks to our relation with municipalities. This is a real, what we call today PPP relation, public-private partnership. For us, it has been a good formula to develop and to organize our programs and to provide physical activity services to people. And it's something that we would like to offer to export or to do in Europe, in other parts of Europe. We have had several experiences with some of you, and we have had some bilateral meetings according to that. Of course, as today we are working in a market, of course we are focused in a social management way, but we are in the market and we need to compete with other competitors. We have private and commercial chains offering physical activity programs too. And due to that, we need to increase the quality of our service, we need to innovate our programs and so on. Of course, our programs are addressed to all types of people, from elderly people, from children, adults, and as a challenge for the future, we are really fighting against the new sedentarism fever. We are trying to offer an added value of physical activity. As you know, the Eurobarometer in 2009 announced that half part of those who are doing physical activity are doing that outside any kind of club or facility structure. For us, we would like to call the attention of those who are participating and to know why they do that on that way. And as an European view, we are participating in ISCA programs, in CHEST, European Confederation Sport and Health programs. We have organized some seminars, events, and we would like to still involve in such lobbying with other international organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We will